Alright, hey guys, for the final episode 4 now of this, BGs rank up advice and deck building advice, this one is going to be a little bit more intricate, and it will be hard to give, broad advice, because for deck building specifically, a lot of the hard work for deck building does have to just be done by yourself, of course, because obviously you are the only one with your roster. So, let's talk about the format of this. So, in this first tab of the spreadsheet, the final setup, you've got your full 30. And then you've got these organized into classes. The classes, it doesn't matter too much about this, like, filling in these classes. I wouldn't focus on that too much. I'm just putting that in there for a visual because I like the visual of that. And yeah, so talking about this, what this means. For aiming for a 20 attackive and 15 defensive, this is the way that I think it's important to think about two-ways. You do not need that many two-ways, but having certain two-ways can allow your defense to still have a lot of options while not limiting yourself from having a super strong attacking deck. But I would not focus too heavily into two-ways. I have seen a lot of decks where, you know, it's fairly heavily focused into two-ways, and the deck just feels significantly weaker than it should, because instead of, you know, filling in these super strong attackers and these super strong defenders, you know, whether or not a character is a two-way or not is factored in a lot more heavily than it should be. And I'm not trying to call anyone out by this. It's just a common flaw I've noticed during these betas. And if you want to make your deck very strong, you can do this with a two-way deck. Of course, there are going to be ways to still have super strong two-ways in your deck. But personally, I would recommend aiming more towards having super strong attackers and super strong defenders. Now, as we get into the other tabs, I will talk a little bit more about two-ways, but one more thing I want to mention. For Tech and Mystic specifically, these are the two classes where I would strongly recommend having your two-ways lie in, because these classes tend to have the most limited uses on attack. At least generally speaking, these two classes tend to have the most limited uses on attack. So filling in your two-ways in these classes can be a very effective way to get those two-ways in, so that you can still have enough defensive options to make it feel like you have to get lucky to get good defenders, but still keeping your attacking deck strong by, you know, instead of having the two-ways taking up your skills and cosmic nukes and mutant nukes and making those classes weaker on attack when you really want those classes to be really strong in attack. Instead, focusing on having most of your two-ways be taken up in the Tech and Mystic classes, so you don't have to sacrifice any of that attacking strength to be filling in these two-ways. That's a very important thing for me, because these classes really do have the most limited uses in general on attack. Obviously, there are certain attackers in these classes that have super general uses, but in general, Tech and Mystic is where I would recommend filling in those two-ways. So yeah, for a number of defensive options, just however many of these that you feel strongly that you can win some defensive rounds with. And for attacking options, again, same thing. It doesn't have to be your super strong attackers, but you definitely want them to be at least noteworthy attackers for that. And yeah. Now, for the second tab of this. The format of this is pretty specific. For this, the thing you want to fill in first is just filling in the general nukes in your deck. I would recommend just filling in the general nukes of your deck. This is going to be the bulk of your attack. These guys are going to get used way more than the specific counters will ever get used. You want to fill in your general nukes, and then you want to fill in what defenders these general nukes are going to, you know, have a pretty good time against. And by doing this, you're going to be able to find the weak spots in your attack. And when you find these weak spots, but one, you can fill in some specific counters. Like, for instance, I have a pretty weak deck towards Cold, for example, so then I can put in Storm or whatever examples you want to go with that. And that can allow you to, again, just fill in the biggest weaknesses on your attack, which is pretty strong for creating a really strong attacking deck. It's a lot more important to have broad coverage rather than, you know, being really good at specific matchups. I think broad coverage that work for a lot of the difficult defenders are often going to be what you really want in your deck. And then 4 strong bans. What this means is just the defenders that your deck is going to deal with the weakest. And then for myself, I have Mephi and Man-Thing just crossed out. This is because I have Mephi and Man-Thing in my deck currently, so I wouldn't be banning those two myself. But I still want them over here for this, because these are the attackers that I want to rank up to help deal with Man-Thing and Mephi on a regular basis, because I'm still going to be fighting these guys even if I'm not generally going to be banning them. And then the other 3 here are Korg, Hulkling, and Domino. These are the other 3 that my deck tends to be the weakest at dealing against, and I want to be ranking Omega Sentinel, Wiccan, Omega Red, and Bishop to help deal with these guys to strengthen my attack and really limit the amount of defenders that my deck would actually struggle with. And that's going to be the one of the important things for deck building in general. And if you can do that, you can get a really, really strong attack with, very, very few weaknesses. Of course, I don't have a lot of these characters that I want to help strengthen my deck, so it's about as strong as I can get it currently attacking right now. But we'll work on that. So these are the attackers that I want to rank up. And then for defenders, the format is a little bit different. For what defenders you want to rank up, I would highly recommend going for mostly time stallers. Because these time stallers really are going to be the bulking up your defensive strength. Because the anti-nuke, while they can win rounds, these guys are going to absolutely be winning rounds on the anti-nuke side of things. When you get a good draft, these guys are going to be able to win rounds. Because they can counter a lot of the general nukes that are going to get drafted regularly. And there are also a lot of time stallers that do serve as anti-nukes, but I would try to recommend getting just the vast majority to just be time stallers, because this helps limit the RNG in your deck. Because when you have a heavy anti-nuke set up for your defense, one of the big things is that if your opponent just gets a strong deck, they're going to have a really, really easy time with this. Whereas if you have a lot of time stallers filled up in your deck, even if your opponent gets a strong draft, you're still going to have a pretty good chance at winning the round, just because of how much time these defenders can really stall for your opponents. Obviously, there will always be an RNG element in the draft, but limiting it by focusing more on time stallers than on anti-nukes is going to be a very, very powerful thing. And again, filling in some of the 2-ways in these anti-nukes and specific counters columns is going to help just overall strengthen your deck, so that while you're not going to be able to get your full deck of time stallers and general nukes, I don't think that's possible. The ones that are going to be weaker will have very strong purposes still, and filling in your 2-ways in these ways can be a valuable way of filling in 2-ways. But again, your main focus should be on making your general nukes and time stallers super strong, because these will limit the amount of these 2-ways and anti-nukes and specific counter options that you will need, which is important. Now, as for banning attackers and ranking specific defenders, this is where this kind of separates from the second tab, because I wouldn't actually recommend ranking defenders just to deal with a specific attacker. Like I just said with these anti-nuke options, you really shouldn't be ranking in that way. You should be ranking towards the time stallers. And, having anti-nukes that fill in a lot of them can be very good. But the reason this is still here is just to give you a place to list out the defenders that you want to rank up to improve your deck. But this isn't going to be associated with this column for you. These are, again, just going to be the attackers that deal the best with your specific deck, of course. And then I have Torch, Hitmonkey, Sunspot, and Tiger crossed out for my own thing, because I already have all of those, and I wouldn't be banning attackers that I already currently have. I mean, it's perfectly fine to do that if you want to delve into that, but personally I like to avoid that, at least until my attacking deck is strong enough to not have weaknesses like these, And that's how I would generally recommend going about building a deck after you get all these good rank ups. Time stallers and general nukes should be the bulk of your deck. These are these are going to be the real meat, what's winning you significant amounts of rounds. And then just filling in with strong anti-nuke options and with strong specific counter options. A lot of these you do want to be 2-ways again, just to fill in the weak spots of your deck, and you can use these columns with all the specific defenders listed to fill in where the weak spots in your deck are. And if there's ever, specific metas that, there's more defenders in a specific meta that are really giving you problems, you can go ahead, fill in however many defenders there are with that meta that are giving you problems. You can add that on and just go with the same concept for this. And the same thing with if there's ever attackers that get really strong with the nodes, like Overseer during Power Snack, then you can add him onto this and go from there for that. And yeah, I hope this template helps you guys. If you have any questions about the template, please just ask a question in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Yeah. This is a pretty strong template for just finding the weaknesses in your roster and building from there. And yeah, I hope this template can help you for making your deck quite stronger. So yeah, take care, y'all.